Everyone give a shout out so that do you have a question?
Good to see you again, Mike. What does the community want?
Good to see you too. Yeah, the community does not want walls upwards. There's also all these components upstream, like detention basins. So the Army did reduce detention basins in the upper watershed. There's components I didn't even get into, which is stream maintenance. Um, but stream maintenance, to my argument, starts in the forest. Um, the community is concerned that the Army Corps is doing what they do often, and that's pour a lot of concrete and not look at a holistic solution. Um, and the one example is that, and I titled the presentation the Ahupua'a because this used to be a watershed with wetlands, and the idea is to try to respect, not only Mother Nature, but the original how people used to integrate with nature. So they don't feel that this is integrated with nature or the community.
Are those differences resolvable in your opinion?
Yeah, I think if you go from a 100-year storm to a 50-year storm, that's going to reduce the overall overreaching, obtrusive, concept. There's other things like they're talking about a pedestrian bridge, and that's the Department of Transportation. That's not talking to the Army Corps that we could integrate a pedestrian bridge at the confluence with a pump gate. So it's all solvable, but you have the city council, the DLNR, the legislature, the mayor's office, the Congress. It's so many agencies, and it's a classic thing where they all have to hold hands and say, okay, Division of Forestry, here's some money, you guys go fix the forest. Okay, DLNR, dredge this thing properly. Okay, maintain the streams, city and county forestry division. Army Corps, let's not go to 100-year, let's go to 50-year, and let's put some pumps that aren't in the face of everybody who lives there. So those are all solvable, and so I've tried to present to every one of those and collectively, and I think there's good intention, and I think the mayor's office is waiting to see what Army Corps comes back with. But I do feel like the Army Corps has been handcuffed by, nope, you're only going to look at Malka rain event. And by the way, you guys, you're modeling, the Army Corps' modeling is the letter of law, and that's what we're going to do. So I think the community feels railroaded, and everybody's skeptical at this point, and everybody's waiting, and it's gone on for 20 years. And so Army Corps people have come and gone, and they, as I said, they eliminated some scope. And so it needs to get, I think it starts with our Congress people, who then have to go back and find the money. And we have a unique opportunity right now with the infrastructure spending to really do this properly.
Mike, I saw 3 events during the time I've lived in Waikiki. One where they tinted the water in the Ala Wai Canel, and over a week tried to show its natural progression in and among the boats and out to sea. A second event is during the Fukushima tsunami at 2 in the morning. I was one of only 2 people standing on the Ala Moana Bridge at the end, and watching the water, I'd say almost 15, 20 miles an hour going up into the canal, and 5 or 6 minutes later going 20 miles an hour in the other direction with an up and down of almost 5 feet as it went among the boats. The third event that occurred a couple years ago and resulted in me in getting a new Nissan Altima is that as I turned off Ala Moana Boulevard into Hobron Lane, my car turned into a boat and I started floating toward the mountains. And that to me appeared to be just as a result of massive local rainfall, not necessarily anything spilling over from the canal. So they all seem to indicate additional functions of water damage than what you've even earmarked on this chart.
Yeah, I mean, the University of Hawaii scientists I talked to think the only solution is to raise the entire city, unless we stop the sea level rise. So it's all relative. I figured we're not going to raise the whole city, so at least have the canal as a drainage, and close off that surge when it happens from the ocean.
Any last question in lieu of that? Lee, thank you for helping us generate this program, and Mike for delivering it.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I definitely am humble, and I know so much, but it has to be a whole bunch of people getting together that know holistically how to solve this. So, but thank you guys. I appreciate your listening and chance to talk.
Great. A little bit of applause from anyone with their videos on. And also at this time, we'll conclude the formal meeting at Sam's willingness. We'll continue in an informal way for a few minutes longer. But Mike, up on the, had you seen that experiment where they dyed the entire Ala Wai Canal and watched its progress? And is that had any useful results?
Well, I think they know from the modeling that it's dead-ended, obviously, and everybody knows it. But like I said, the Army Corps they're not tasked with water quality. They're tasked with evacuation, and they're not allowed, nobody's going to allow them to cut open the canal at the Waikiki, the Kapiolani Park end. So the only thing that test did was reinforce that this is dead-ended, that it is under tidal influence, but it's 2 miles nearly long, I believe, and it's tidal influence can only do so much.
What I saw there was how the effluent went in and among the boats. I thought that was one of the concerns.
Well, I asked the Army Corps, at your 1% modeling, isn't that going to flush all the boats out of the harbor? And they said no. They said there'll be velocity, but it's not enough to flush boats out of the harbor. So again, I don't know the hydrology, and I didn't study. I'm an expert in closed flow pumping, but open channel hydrology is not my expertise. So I know enough to be dangerous, and that's where I can only bring up the concerns and then ask that they be double checked, triple checked. But yeah, if I had a boat there, I would be very concerned about what's coming onto that bridge.
I just wanted to know, can you get any footage of that system that you're proposing from any of your experiences in Australia? Because I've been down there and I've seen those pumps work in the rivers when they pump the rivers, and they just dry up. And I think what would be really, really powerful for your presentation is to actually get some live footage of some of those pumps in action.
I'm extremely sensitive to anybody being a guinea pig. So it has been done around the world. So I do. The problem is that the 3,000 cubic feet per second number doesn't meet the Army Corps' requirements. So they want, I trying to remember if it's 7,000 or 10,000 or giant pumps. So so 3,000 is kind of the practical limit for those type of pumps, to be out of sight, out of mind from the public's perception, down at the canal level. You got to go 5,000 and more, you got to go with giant above ground stations. And so that's really why it hasn't progressed. And so that's why this talk of a 50-year storm is critical to overcome this Army Corps resistance.
Thank you. Thank you. That explains a lot.
Go ahead,
But
Frank.
Yeah,
Sorry.
have they thought of putting the pumps on the other end up at Kapahulu and taking even possibly somehow integrating the drainage of Waikiki and the Kapahulu area in that area that's going in the canal, but trying to pick all that up and send it out into the ocean on, you know, there at the pier or further out. And I realize there's a lot of environmental issues and emotional, but that would be another way to use like your 3,000 gallon pumps at that end, as well as the 3,000 at the other end, might still get some of the total flow out. And it would probably pick up a good chunk of the Manoa incoming flow.
Yeah, so the concept of putting storm flow near the Kapahulu Pier is just unacceptable to the community, to the Army Corps. You know, the Army Corps could do it, but it would basically end up right on Waikiki Beach and all those reef structures. So the advantage of the canal at the harbor end is it's hydraulically, it would go more towards deep water faster. Obviously, if you had a southerly storm, it's going to blow right back up on the beach. But most of the time, that's the ideal deep water exit. But anyways, it just wasn't a starting point. The Oceanet was hired by City Council to look at this, and they proposed what they called swift tunnels up in Manoa, Palolo, and those would be tunnels all the way from upper watershed down about a quarter mile offshore. And the cost was really high, the planning, the environmental impact, but that would bypass the canal and it would also bypass the coral reefs. So I saw that as, and it wouldn't deal with the forest, you know, erosion, watershed, all that, but it would be a way to make the problem go away. But the cost was, I think, I don't know, 2 to 3 times what the Army Corps is currently budgeted. And then the planning, design, you're looking at least 10, 15 years.
Has any thought been in making it actually in conjunction with the golf course? When I was paddling and going up alongside the golf course, it actually is a very attractive waterway off of the canal. To actually make that as an attractive enough to be inventing a barge or a gondola or something, and having that as part of something to appreciate, rather than just seeing it filled with junk and really unused. It has the delightful potential as far as I could see, and reminds me of some of the things I've seen in Dusseldorf in Germany.
Yeah, it's amazing that 100 years have gone by and it's just been this, it looks great at night and you know, in pictures, but it just has nobody wants to jump in. So and by the way, even with fixing the forest, you're never going to get rid of all the silt and sediment. I mean, that's the wetlands. They drained the wetlands 100 years ago and cleaned up Waikiki because it was a natural ecosystem. So I don't expect getting rid of pigs and invasive plants to eliminate debris, but to reduce it to a significant amount, and then use the golf course and really our technology today with drainage fields and, you know, using it for storms and then clearing it out and using it for golf. And so I don't know if that's feasible, but that golf course lies exactly where that debris field needs to go before it makes its way into the ocean and canal itself. But yeah, I just, it blows my mind how many people are on Waikiki Beach every day and this amazing if you had a lazy river, can you imagine, people wouldn't have to rent cars and drive all over the island, and they could go, oh, let's go to the canal today. Let's go to the ocean today. Let's, take a hike up Diamond Head. So it's really this holistic view that this can be, and the people who live in the area, let's jump in the canal and float down.
Mike, I have to say, I don't know, and I know you don't claim to be the first one to have this idea, but I think you remember Alan Lloyd, who used to be, and he had this idea of putting pumps at the end of the Ala Wai, I would say 30 years ago. So I don't know how old this idea is, but that was his idea, is to put some pumps there at the end of the Ala Wai and provide some flow through the Ala Wai.
Yeah, and it's easy to kill the idea by saying 3,000 cubic feet per second is not going to do it. But 3,000 cubic feet per second is a lot of water. And how often have we overtopped the canal right now in the last 100 years? And so if we fix the debris again, and the stream, Woodlawn Bridge, if we've learned nothing, showed us how much is coming from the forest and plugging these arteries. So then we get flooding in Manoa. We get flooding all the way to the canal. And so my argument is let's make sure we don't get flooding in Woodlawn Drive, and 3,000 cubic feet per second, if we've dealt with, more absorption in the forest, is going to reduce that peak on the hydrograph. So.
Yeah, on the political side, I'm half wondering if we need to have an Ala Wai Canal Authority, even though I don't know if I like that idea or not, but then maybe they would be able to pull everybody together to get something done.
Yeah, I hate to dump it on our Congress people, but they're the ones that get the funding, certainly at this point with the economy and the infrastructure bill. So I think if there's a legislator, there's some city council members, there's the sustainability office at the mayor's office. I think there's people that get it. I think DLNR Forestry certainly gets it. It's just a matter of bringing them together and then getting the congressional authorization that would expand the Army Corps to work with forestry, to work with city and county to get the fresh seawater. So it's not rocket science, it's just bureaucracy.
Hey, Mike, thanks again for agreeing to be our speaker. As you can tell, this has generated a lot of interest.
Yeah,
I actually have to go. I actually have to go to work. So I'm going to say, ahui ho. Thank you again so much. Aloha.
Hey,
Okay, thanks, Lee.
If you put a slope on a channel that is at sea level, does the water flow downhill, or what's the advantage?
Yeah, so there's an inherent surface, and again, it's really frustrating for me because I don't have the time or the expertise to answer that properly. But the Army Corps has said we don't think it's enough. So I'm not arguing with that. I'm arguing that if you do all of these things, then I think collectively it's enough. But I do know that water flowing in a channel is going just like a stream. The rougher the walls and floor of that channel, the more you're going to get friction and resistance, and then overflow. And so the first thing is, just from a theoretical standpoint, if we dredge to 25 feet versus 12 feet, then we've got more capacity. So for two aspects, one is we can draw it down in an extreme storm event and have it as, holding that much more water, and we're moving 3,000 cubic feet per second 2-3 hours before the storm. We know when these storms are going to hit. And then from a hydraulic standpoint, I need somebody to model that and say, if we slope it at the bottom, obviously if we've got elevation difference, we're going to get higher velocity. But if we slope it at the bottom, or even dredge it all the way to 25 feet, are we going to have faster evacuation, because the Army Corps is arguing you're going to get it back. It can't get to the harbor fast enough, even if we pump at the harbor. As fast as we pump at the harbor, we just can't get it. It's going to start backing up. And so that's an important question that needs to be modeled properly. And from everything I've seen from the Army Corps, it hasn't been modeled properly.
Thank you.
And I haven't seen everything from the Army Corps. So I have to say that, I respect their expertise to a great deal, and they put a lot of years into this. So I'm not going to come in and go, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to come in and go, what if, can I see the model where you dredged it to 25 feet?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'll forget my background, but basically, how much of the capacity of this whole system, how would it be affected if the actual bed of the streams where the concrete is was actually opened up, put 6-inch holes in every square foot of concrete that you have there, and drain into the aquifer? Would that not absorb enough water to make a difference?
I've been told it does not, and it's simply a time versus volume equation. The velocity, anytime you have velocity involved, it sort of blows away an absorption component.
Okay, thank you.
And that came up when all these detention basins were proposed up in the upper watershed, and everybody's like, you're going to take out my house, and I'm going to have this flood detention right next to this neighborhood. But the question was, well, we can get absorption from those detention basins. And then when they actually did the math, it was measurable, but it would help, but it wouldn't help to a significant amount.
Okay, thanks.
But again, this triple threat is really what caught my attention. I started to what's groundwater sea level rise, and what's, what about Hurricane Iniki? Because I was living in Wilhelmina Rise at the time, and we boarded up our windows, and if it had hit Waikiki, which it was supposed to do, I think we would be looking at this differently.
So Mike, what is actually the status now? You talked about that giant pump station, but it sounds like the Corps has given up on it. So is this kind of back in the redesign phase or the reconcept stage?
I believe there's an environmental review that I don't know all the, there's always steps, but basically what I was told is the pump station is staying at the golf course. There is no pump station proposed at the harbor, and I think that's a fatal flaw for the other two threat reasons. But the pump station at this point, it's about 3.5 stories tall. And that concept, I flashed through that concept really quick, but basically it's a 3.5 story station with gates, miter gates that close off the canal, and walls. The whole idea is that they have to come up with walls. And the minute you come up with walls, you got utilities under those walls. You've got the substructure underneath that, I would think you got to rebuild. Because the Army Corps said, well, Mike, if we evacuate the canal, now those walls are going to collapse that aren't built right. And I said, they probably need to be rebuilt no matter what. They're 100 years old. So this is not cheap. But building walls down is an elegant solution. Building walls up is sort of like, I give up, to me. And sometimes you need walls, but I just think if you look at everything combined, you could actually either eliminate or certainly minimize them.
Yeah, well, I commend you for coming up with this presentation. I think you have a lot of good ideas here and a lot of good arguments. Somebody should pay attention to this. And you've given this to a number of different people as well.
Yeah, and it's gotten better over the years, so I probably need to, if the Army Corps will give me another shot at it. But again, it's this, oh, well, we modeled that and you don't know all the data. And I'm like, okay, if you modeled it and I don't know what I'm talking about, then I'll move on. But I do think there's a degree where the Army Corps is, again, they've been restricted in their scope. So when you restrict the scope to not look at holistic, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, I agree.
Mike, as a man who has a passion for Hawaiian history, the fact that the Ala Wai Canal was built by private enterprise was a big surprise to me. I mean,
Is that a joke?
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I'll use it next week.
It was the commercial interest that we can have this amazing tourist destination. And so that was, and plus they owned a lot of the property, those private interests. And they're like, how can I make my property more valuable?
And I believe the coral that they dug out was a very valuable resource that was used other places.
Yeah.
When I stood during the tsunami, I noticed a phenomena that was at first hard to explain, and I've not found it in textbooks or otherwise, but there was a very clear two-layered flow at the canal, that the ocean waters were rushing in at the same time the Ala Wai was rushing out.
Right.
And is that a standard thing in the modeling, or was I observing a very unusual circumstance? It put a time lag between when the canal was getting deeper and when it was getting shallower that seemed to be counterintuitive to the direction at the top surface.
Yeah, there's a expert at UH that kind of convinced the Army that if storm surge did happen, it would happen almost exclusively up the canal. And then I talked to other experts, as you saw in the presentation, that sort of said, well, yeah, it's going to do that, but then it's also going to come over the beach. So, so this modeling is really a juggling act of how bad is the storm? Is it coming from the south? Is it coming from the southeast? What's the intensity and the wave heights? And so I think I try to step back and look at, what Aniki did to the south coast of Kauai, and some of the, nobody was out there on the beach when it happened, but there was certainly a lot of, and they did, I think the Army Corps did look at that, and this, certainly this expert at UH. So it's a complicated model, of making a lot of assumptions.
It was quite counterintuitive, though. I'm seeing the water coming in almost 20 miles an hour. You knew that meant it should be getting deeper, but the whole canal in that part of the harbor dropped by 5 feet.
And did you say that was the storm surge, or was that a tsunami?
Tsunami.
Yeah. I've watched a lot of the tsunamis. I'm the first. I don't run to the ocean when there's a tsunami, but if I know it's not gonna, they know what size these are generally, but I've seen impacts as well similar. It's pretty amazing.
And Phil, you watched that from your lanai, right?
No, I
No?
watched it from the bridge because I
Oh,
felt
okay.
the bridge had a nice upward slope to it, and it couldn't possibly reach the top end. And there was one other person, as we made that conclusion, when we're watching it come in, we both agreed that the two ends of the bridge we could escape from would be underwater. So we said, well, let's just enjoy and be really good scientists and clock some of this that we're watching.
Front row seat.
The University of Hawaii had a hydraulics laboratory called the Look Laboratory, and it was named after a hydrologist who was standing on a bridge in Hilo when he was washed off by the tidal wave from the 40s. So
We could have named something after you.
yeah, it could have been the Phil.
Hey, well, thank you, everybody. It is an honor to speak to you guys, and hopefully, I'm not, again, as I said, an expert in all this, just trying to look at it holistically. So appreciate it.
can
Thanks a
give
lot,
us
Mike.
applause for that.
Yeah, that's really good.
Thanks for
Right on.
thanks for staying on and answering
You
our
bet.
questions.
You bet. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, you too.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.